The bridge that should have stood, the detonation cord lies frayed in Jake McNiece's hands, like a prayer he's not sure God wants to hear. Dawn creeps across the Dutch countryside near Waal, September 1944, painting the flooded polders in shades of grey that match his mood. Operation Market Garden was supposed to be surgical: drop at midnight, rig the charges, withdraw before sunrise. Instead, half his filthy 13 are scattered across 20 miles of enemy territory. His primary explosives rest somewhere at the bottom of a drainage canal, and the stone bridge behind him stands intact, like a monument to everything that's gone sideways. The bridge spans the narrow waterway with Germanic efficiency, its steel beams humming faintly in the pre-dawn breeze. Jake runs his thumb along the damaged TNT satchel beside him, feeling cordite leak through the canvas where a rifle round punched through during his jump. Not enough explosive left to bring down the foundation, but maybe, just maybe, enough to sever the load-bearing girder that anchors the eastern span. 20 yards away, Liebgott crouches behind a collapsed farm wall, his paratrooper helmet barely visible above the stone. The kid from San Francisco, who used to joke about the filthy 13's appearance, their long hair, their disregard for regulation uniforms, isn't laughing now. Not with German voices echoing from the tree line, growing closer with each passing minute. "McNiece, they're moving fast on the approach," Liebgott whispers through the darkness. Jake nods, his Chicago accent cutting low through the morning air. "Then we better make sure they don't have anywhere to go." The irony tastes bitter as week-old coffee. Back at regiment, officers questioned Jake's methods, his tendency to improvise when careful planning was called for. They called the filthy 13 undisciplined, unreliable. Now their careful planning lies scattered across the Dutch countryside, like his missing charges, and improvisation is all that stands between German armour and the British columns supposedly advancing from the south. He strips the frayed detonation cord with his knife, exposing fresh copper wire. The splice work demands steady hands, but his fingers betray a tremor he can't quite control. Not fear. He's moved beyond that particular luxury. This is something deeper, the weight of knowing that every rivet in that bridge, every steel beam, might determine whether his scattered paratroopers live to see another Dutch sunrise. The damaged satchel holds maybe 20 pounds of usable TNT, waterlogged and unstable. By every manual he's ever read, it should be worthless. But Jake McNiece has learned something in 18 months of combat that no engineering textbook teaches. Every structure has a breaking point, and sometimes the right pressure applied at precisely the right moment matters more than overwhelming force. Behind him, the bridge waits. Engineers built it to carry tanks, artillery, the full weight of an advancing army. One damaged satchel and 300 feet of compromised cord seem pathetically inadequate against such permanence. But Jake's job isn't to question the odds. It's to find the weak spot and exploit it before Wehrmacht reinforcements roll toward Arnhem unopposed. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation, and stay with us for the next chapters. Lieutenant Morrison's voice crackles through the pre-dawn static, barely audible over the German patrol engines, probing the roads near Waal. "McNiece, I need that bridge intact for another 2 hours. British armour is 20 minutes out." Jake adjusts his radio, watching Liebgott's position behind the farm wall. The kid's rifle tracks movement in the tree line steady despite the MG-42 bursts that chewed stone from his cover moments earlier. "Sir, with respect, those tanks aren't 20 minutes out. They're 20 miles out, maybe more." The pause stretches long enough for Jake to finish another splice in the detonation cord. When Morrison's voice returns, it carries the weight of a man caught between conflicting orders and ground truth. "How do you know?" "Because if British armour was that close, Jerry wouldn't be probing this crossing with 2 full squads. They'd be dug in or falling back." Jake keeps working, his hands moving with practiced certainty despite the chaos. The TNT satchel beside him represents everything wrong with this operation. Misdropped supplies, damaged equipment, plans that looked clean on paper but dissolved on contact with reality. Operation Market Garden promised precision, but precision requires supply lines that reach their targets and radios that work when you need them most. From his position in a flooded ditch 50 yards south, Talbot signals with hand gestures. More movement. Vehicles approaching from the east, engines growing louder. Jake counts the sound. At least 3 trucks, maybe a half-track. Enough men to overrun their scattered position if the bridge gives them a clear route to consolidate. The math is brutal but simple. Hold the bridge intact and risk German armor using it to crush the scattered remnants of the 506th PIR across this sector. Blow it now and trap any Allied reinforcements on the wrong side of the canal. Either choice costs lives. The only question is whose. Jake repositions his remaining charges, abandoning any thought of demolishing the foundation. Instead, he focuses on the single steel girder that carries the load for the eastern span, a target that demands surgical placement and timing that leaves no margin for error. The detonation cord stretches behind him like a lifeline, its copper core his only connection between intention and execution. He's spliced it 6 times now, each repair more desperate than the last. By every technical manual, it should have failed already. But it holds, stubborn as the bridge itself. Morrison's voice returns, tighter now. Jake, I'm getting pressure from Division. They want confirmation on bridge status. Tell Division the bridge is standing. What they do with that information is above my pay grade. But Jake's already made his choice. The German voices are close enough to distinguish individual words now, orders, coordinates, the methodical language of men who believe they control this stretch of Dutch countryside. Maybe they're right. Maybe 3 scattered paratroopers with a damaged satchel can't hold back an advancing column. Jake McNiece has never been good at accepting maybe. The news reaches them through fragmentary radio traffic and the hollow expressions of stragglers, filtering back through the flooded polders. Arnhem is failing. British paratroopers hold a shrinking perimeter around the bridge while German reinforcements pour into the sector. The grand design of Operation Market Garden, that clean thrust through Dutch territory toward the Rhine, has devolved into isolated fights around canal crossings and village squares. Jake listens to the reports while making final adjustments to his charges, each piece of intelligence reshaping the tactical picture. If Arnhem falls, every German unit between here and the Zuider Zee will pivot south toward this crossing. The bridge behind him transforms from tactical objective to strategic necessity, the difference between Allied withdrawal and Allied catastrophe. Liebgott works his way closer through the drainage ditch, his movements careful and deliberate. The kid who once mocked the filthy 13's appearance now moves with the quiet competence of a soldier who's learned that survival demands adaptation to circumstances no training manual anticipated. McNiece, what happens if the cord doesn't hold? Jake tests another splice, feeling the copper wire's texture between his fingers. Then we find another way. What if there isn't another way? The question hangs in the morning air like cordite smoke. Jake has carried similar questions through Normandy hedgerows and across contested causeways, the weight of decisions that reduce complex tactical situations to binary choices. Blow or hold, advance or withdraw, live with the consequences or let someone else carry the burden. From the rear supply point 3 miles back, Staff Sergeant Coleman tracks the morning's expenditures in his careful handwriting. 2 TNT satchels reported lost on landing. 1 blasting cap tin missing from the filthy 13's inventory. 300 feet of detonation cord signed out to McNiece with no return authorization. The paperwork tells a story of careful planning, undermined by the chaotic realities of night drops and scattered objectives. Coleman has served with enough demolition crews to recognize the pattern. When the official plan fails, someone like McNiece improvises a solution that either saves the situation or makes it spectacularly worse. The after-action reports rarely capture the distinction. Jake finishes his splice work and begins backing toward the detonator position, unrolling cord behind him. The German patrol has reached the bridge approach, their silhouettes visible against the morning sky. A lieutenant in field grey points toward the farm wall, where Liebgott maintains his position, then signals for flanking movement. The detonator waits in a shell crater beside a burned-out farmhouse, its brass terminals tarnished but functional. Jake estimates the distance at 100 yards, close enough for reliable initiation, far enough to survive the blast if everything works as intended, if the splices hold, if the waterlogged charges detonate properly, if 20 pounds of damaged TNT can accomplish what 200 pounds should have done. Too many variables, too many chances for failure. But Jake has learned that combat rarely offers ideal solutions, only choices between different types of risk. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. The German advance squad reaches the bridge just as Jake connects the detonation leads, their jackboots echoing against stone and steel. Through his field glasses, he watches a Wehrmacht sergeant test the span's stability, probably calculating load capacity for the armor that will follow. The sergeant moves with professional competence, checking girders and foundations, the same way Jake himself might inspect a target. Time collapses to seconds and splice points. Jake's hands work the detonator terminals, while his mind tracks variables. The advancing patrol, Liebgott's ammunition count, the uncertain status of Allied reinforcements somewhere beyond the flooded polders. The bridge spans 60 meters of canal, its steel beams designed to carry the weight of armies. His damaged satchel contains enough explosive to maybe sever one critical support. The sergeant on the bridge kneels beside the eastern girder, running his hand along the steel. For a moment, Jake sees himself reflected in the enemy soldier's methodical inspection. Both men understand that bridges exist at the intersection of engineering and warfare, where mathematical calculations determine who lives and who dies. Liebgott's rifle cracks from behind the farm wall, the muzzle flash drawing immediate return fire. MG-42 bursts chew stone and timber, forcing the kid lower into cover. The German patrol splits, half providing suppressive fire, while the rest advance through the drainage ditches that thread this sector like arteries. Jake grips the detonator plunger, feeling its wooden handle smooth from countless training exercises. The bridge hums with vibration as the German squad crosses, testing each section for damage or prepared charges. They move with the confidence of soldiers who've learned to anticipate Allied demolition tactics, checking obvious placement points where standard doctrine would position explosives. But Jake McNiece has never been particularly concerned with standard doctrine. His charges rest against the load-bearing girder's stress concentration, not where the manual suggests, but where 18 months of combat experience indicates the structure will fail most catastrophically. It's improvisation built on intuition, the kind of solution that works until it doesn't. The detonation cord stretches between his position and the bridge like a copper lifeline, each splice a potential failure point. He's repaired it 7 times, working by touch in darkness while German patrols closed the distance. The wire should have snapped already. Every technical specification suggests it's inadequate for reliable transmission across this distance. Jake pushes the plunger down. The explosion tears through the morning quiet with a sound like the world's largest door slamming shut. The eastern span's girder doesn't just break, it disintegrates, sending steel fragments spinning across the canal in geometric patterns that reflect months of accumulated stress, finally finding release. The bridge folds inward on itself with surprising grace, stone and steel settling into the waterway with the finality of a period ending a long sentence. Where 60 meters of German engineering once spanned the canal, only twisted wreckage and settling debris remain. Through the smoke, Jake sees the Wehrmacht sergeant clinging to a broken section of guardrail, his professional composure replaced by the universal expression of a man who's just experienced something beyond his training's scope. The silence after the explosion carries weight Jake wasn't prepared for. Not the tactical silence of successful demolition, but something deeper. The quiet of a man who's just committed an act that will live in after-action reports and memory long after the war ends. The bridge that should have stood, engineered to last centuries, now rests in pieces at the bottom of a Dutch canal because one demolition NCO decided orders were suggestions. Liebgott works his way through the drainage ditch toward Jake's position, his movements careful and deliberate. The kid's face carries the expression of someone who's witnessed something beyond standard military operations, not just successful demolition, but the moment when a single soldier's judgment overrode an entire command structure. Jesus, McNiece, Division's going to have your ass for this. Jake stares at the wreckage, his hand still gripping the detonator. What the kid doesn't understand, what the after-action reports will never capture, is the weight of standing alone with a decision that affects every Allied soldier in this sector. Not the heroic weight that makes good stories, but the crushing certainty that you've just bet other men's lives on your ability to read a tactical situation correctly. The German sergeant survived the collapse, clinging to debris in the canal, while his patrol reorganizes on the far bank. For a moment, Jake considers the man's perspective, a professional soldier watching critical infrastructure disappear because someone chose improvisation over procedure. The sergeant probably has standing orders regarding bridge security, specific protocols for situations like this. Jake just made those orders irrelevant. Lieutenant Morrison's voice crackles through the radio, tight with the kind of controlled anger that precedes courts martial. McNiece, what's the status on that bridge? Bridge is down, sir. Girder failure caused total structural collapse. I didn't authorize demolition. We needed that crossing intact. The pause stretches while Jake considers his response. The truth, that he watched German armor massing for a thrust that would have crushed every scattered paratrooper in this sector, sounds like justification after the fact. Command decisions made in isolation always look different when explained to people who weren't there. Sir, the bridge was compromised. German engineers were already assessing load capacity for heavy vehicles. Another pause. In the background, Jake hears radio traffic from other units, fragments of reports that paint a picture of Operation Market Garden's larger failures, delayed drops, scattered objectives, communication breakdowns that transformed careful planning into individual judgment calls. Morrison's voice returns. Careful now. Jake, I need you to walk me through exactly what happened. Division will want a full report. And there it is, the moment when lived experience transforms into official narrative. Jake understands that his report will determine not just his own fate, but how this action gets remembered. A heroic demolition that prevented enemy armor from reaching critical positions, or an act of insubordination that destroyed vital infrastructure against explicit orders. The damaged TNT satchel lies empty beside his position, its canvas torn and cordite stained. Tomorrow it will become evidence in someone's investigation. Next month it might become part of a citation or a reprimand. Years later it will rest in a footlocker filled with memories Jake carries alone. The after-action report reduces Jake's night to 3 clean sentences. Demolition charges successfully employed against canal crossing, bridge destroyed, denying enemy armor access to Allied positions, mission accomplished with minimal friendly casualties. Staff Sergeant Coleman types the words with the careful precision of a man who understands that official history demands clarity, even when lived experience offers only fragments and contradictions. What the report doesn't capture: the weight of Jake's hands as he spliced detonation cord in darkness, each repair a small prayer offered to gods of copper wire and mathematical probability. The expression on the German sergeant's face as 60 meters of engineering collapsed beneath him, the quiet conversation between Jake and Liebgott afterward, when the kid asked what happens to soldiers who make decisions above their authority level. 3 weeks later, Jake receives word through unofficial channels that British armour eventually crossed the canal using a temporary span erected by Royal Engineers. The delay cost 18 hours, time that might have made the difference at Arnhem, or might have saved lives by preventing a premature assault. Military history will debate the tactical implications for decades. Jake carries the personal implications alone. Lieutenant Morrison submits 2 reports: the official version that emphasizes successful mission completion, and a classified addendum that questions whether demolition was authorized or improvised. The contradiction reflects a larger truth about combat leadership. Sometimes the men who achieve impossible objectives do so by ignoring the orders that make them impossible. From his position at the rear supply point, Coleman tallies the morning's equipment expenditure: 1 TNT satchel, properly expended in demolition operations; 300 feet of detonation cord, successfully employed against infrastructure target; 1 bridge, formerly German-held, now neutral territory at the bottom of a Dutch canal. The arithmetic suggests efficiency, though Coleman suspects the human mathematics tell a different story. Years later, Jake sits in an Oklahoma diner, listening to freight trains rumble past on elevated tracks. The sound carries him back to that morning near Wall, when steel beams hummed with vibration before yielding to 20 pounds of waterlogged explosive and 1 demolition NCO's judgment call. He remembers the weight of the detonator plunger, the texture of frayed copper wire, the silence that followed decisions made in isolation. The waitress refills his coffee while trains echo overhead, their rhythm matching the cadence of choices that seemed clear at the time but grew complicated in memory. Jake understands now that some bridges need to fall regardless of orders, and some bridges need to stand despite tactical advantage. The difference lies not in engineering manuals or command authority, but in the terrible mathematics of standing alone with other men's lives balanced on your ability to read a situation correctly. The legend of McNiece and the Filthy 13 reduces that night to anecdotes about insubordination and successful improvisation. Jake carries the fuller truth, that heroism often looks like fear and stubbornness from the inside, and that the bridges you choose to blow sometimes matter less than the bridges you carry in memory afterward. If this story reminded you that behind every medal and mission report there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.